My name is Richard Dillard. I was 39 years old when I sat in my truck on a quiet street in Decatur, Georgia, engine off, hands still on the wheel, watching my wife walk out of a house that did not belong to her mother. She was laughing. Not the small, polite laugh she gave when something was mildly funny. This was the kind of laugh that starts somewhere deep and moves through a person's whole body. The kind I used to be the reason for. She came through the front door of that red brick house, turned, and said something back through the open doorway, and a man I had never seen in my life leaned against the door frame and smiled at her like she was the best part of his entire weekend. She was. That I would understand later. I had been driving to that address for 7 hours with nothing but a thermos of coffee and a feeling I had been trying to talk myself out of for 4 months. I want to be honest about that. I had been trying very hard not to know what I now knew. I had been doing what men do when they love someone and the evidence starts arriving before they are ready. I had been filing it away, smoothing it over, giving her the benefit of every doubt I had. I was out of doubts. Before I tell you what happened on that street in Decatur, let me tell you who I was before it. Because that part matters. You need to know what was standing in that parking lot before you understand what walked away from it. I am Richard Dillard. I grew up in Southwest Atlanta, the second of 3 boys, raised by a woman who worked the overnight shift at a fulfillment center for 11 years so that none of us ever had to wonder if dinner was coming. My mother, Dorothy Dillard, ironed her work uniform every single night before her shift and came home every morning in time to see us off to school. She was not a woman who cut corners. She was not a woman who complained. She told me once, when I was about 14 and sulking about something I have long since forgotten, that the only thing a man truly owns is his word and his work ethic. Everything else is borrowed. I carried that. I am a licensed electrician and the owner of a small electrical contracting business. I started out of my truck 9 years ago with 1 helper, a borrowed generator, and a handshake agreement with a property manager who gave me a shot on a 4-plex renovation. That 4-plex turned into a commercial building. That commercial building turned into a referral that brought me a school district contract. I have 8 full-time employees now, a small office off Campbellton Road, and a reputation in this city that I built 1 completed job at a time. I am not a man who brags. I am a man who shows up. Samantha came into my life 6 years ago at a church fundraiser I almost did not attend. My friend Alex had spent 2 weeks convincing me that I needed to get out of the house, that I had been working too hard and living too small. I showed up late. I was wearing a polo shirt I had ironed myself and holding a plate of food I did not plan to eat. She was across the room laughing at something her friend had said, and when she turned and our eyes met for the first time, she gave me the kind of look that does not get taught. It just is. We talked for 3 hours that evening. I walked her to her car. She drove home. I sat in mine for 10 minutes before I could make myself leave. We were married 2 years later in a garden ceremony in Stone Mountain with 70 people. My mother in the front row in the green dress she had bought 3 months early, and Alex standing beside me at the altar whispering commentary under his breath that I am still not able to repeat in polite company. Samantha walked toward me through afternoon light that caught the beading on her dress, and I thought something I have never said out loud to anyone except my journal that night. I thought I would burn down everything I ever built if she needed me to. That is the kind of love I am talking about. The kind that does not negotiate with itself. We built something real together. She was a registered nurse working in a pediatric unit at Grady Hospital, good at her job in the specific way that certain people are, not just skilled but called to it. Children responded to her. Parents trusted her. She had the hands and the voice for it. I admired that about her without reservation. We bought a house in East Point 2 years into the marriage. 3 bedrooms, a yard with a pecan tree that dropped more than we could ever use, and a kitchen she redesigned herself with a chalkboard wall she said she wanted because she never had one growing up. I installed every light fixture in that house personally. Every single one. I wanted the light to be right. For 2.5 years, everything we had felt honest. Then her mother got sick. Mrs. Evelyn Carter, Samantha's mother, lived in Decatur on her own since Samantha's father passed 6 years back. She was a proud, self-sufficient woman in her mid-60s who had, according to Samantha, begun experiencing a series of health complications that were manageable but required regular attention and company. High blood pressure, some issues with her knees, the occasional bad week that left her needing help around the house. Samantha started going on weekends. Every Saturday, sometimes staying through Sunday afternoon. She would kiss me at the door, tell me not to wait up, and pull out of the driveway with a casserole dish or a grocery bag and the particular expression of a daughter doing what daughters do. I never questioned it. I loved that she was devoted. I told her so. I told Alex once that watching Samantha care for her mother was one of the things that made me certain I had chosen right. For months ago, that certainty began to develop a crack so small I almost missed it. Almost. The first sign was not dramatic. It never is. It was a Tuesday evening in February. I had finished a long job in College Park and come home an hour earlier than expected. The house was quiet. Samantha was on the phone in the bedroom with the door almost, but not completely, closed. I was not listening. I came in through the side door, set my keys down, and started washing my hands at the kitchen sink. The words I caught were not suspicious by themselves. What caught me was the sound underneath them. I have been with Samantha for 6 years. I know her voice in every register. I know the voice she uses with patients, with her mother, with her coworkers, with her friends. I know the voice she uses with me. What came through that partially open bedroom door was something else. Lower, warmer, slower. The voice of a person who is not being careful because they do not think anyone is listening. I kept washing my hands. I dried them on the dish towel. I went to the refrigerator and stood there looking at nothing for a moment. She came out of the bedroom 30 seconds later. She saw me and her face arranged itself into something warm and easy, but there was a beat, not long, maybe less than a second, where I saw something flash across her eyes that I did not have a name for yet. "Hey, baby, I didn't hear you come in." She kissed my cheek. "Quiet day," I said. I said nothing else about it. I filed it. 3 weeks later, the second thing. We were at the dinner table on a Wednesday. I asked how her mother was doing, genuinely, the way I always did, and she gave me the answer she always gave. The knees were the same. The blood pressure was better this week. The physical therapist was coming on Thursdays. Then I asked something I had never thought to ask before. I do not know exactly why I asked it that night. Something in the air, maybe. Or just the natural place a question eventually arrives when you have been paying close enough attention. "Has her doctor changed her medication recently? I remember you mentioned the dosage was being adjusted." Samantha looked at me. Quick. Brief. Then she looked back at her plate. "He's thinking about it," she said. "We'll see." 6 months ago, she had told me her mother's doctor was a woman. A Dr. Patricia were out of a practice in Decatur. I had even looked up the practice once when Samantha mentioned the address, because I had considered sending flowers on her mother's difficult birthday. A woman doctor does not become he without a reason. I said nothing. I ate my food. I said dinner was good, because it was. I went to bed at a normal hour and lay in the dark beside my wife and ran through the last 6 months in my mind the way I run through an electrical schematic when something is not adding up, slowly, methodically, looking for the fault in the line. There were other things once I started looking with clearer eyes. A new perfume that appeared in the bathroom around November with no occasion attached to it. Not her birthday, not our anniversary, just a bottle that appeared on the shelf. She had always worn the same scent since I met her. A warm, light fragrance I would know anywhere. This one was different. Sharper. More considered. She started taking her phone to the bathroom at night. She had never done that before. In 4 years of marriage, her phone charged on the nightstand beside her because she was a nurse and needed to hear it in case the hospital called. Now it came with her. Every night. And the Saturdays had extended. What used to be Saturday afternoon through evening had become Friday evening through Sunday by noon. Every week. Consistent as clockwork. She always had an explanation. A rough night. A fall that had not been serious but had shaken her mother. Paperwork for a new prescription. I believed her each time because I wanted to. Because I had spent 6 years building something with this woman, and the mind protects what the heart has invested in. But here is the thing about being a man who works with electrical systems. You learn that the most dangerous faults are not the obvious ones. The obvious ones blow a fuse. The dangerous ones run quiet for a long time, drawing power in the wrong direction, invisible until something burns. I had been living with a quiet fault for months. On the last Friday of March, Samantha kissed me goodbye at 7 in the evening, told me her mother had had a difficult week, and pulled out of the driveway with her overnight bag in the back seat. I stood at the kitchen window and watched her taillights disappear at the end of the block. Then I went to the kitchen table, sat down, and called Mrs. Evelyn Carter. She picked up on the third ring. I could hear the television in the background, one of her gospel music programs she watched on Friday evenings. Richard, baby. How are you, sweetheart? I'm good, Mrs. Carter. How are you feeling this week? I kept my voice easy and warm. Samantha mentioned it was a rough one. A pause. Short, but there. Oh, I've been just fine, honey. Nothing to worry about. My knees were a little stiff on Tuesday, but the Lord worked it out. I'll be at church Sunday. She laughed the way she always did, that light, untroubled sound of a woman who had genuinely been having a fine week. She had no idea her daughter was supposed to be on the way to take care of her. I thanked her. I told her I'd been thinking of her. I told her I loved her and to take care of herself. We hung up. I sat at that kitchen table for a very long time. I did not go to bed that night. I sat in the kitchen with the lights low and thought about the man my mother raised. She raised a man who does not jump to conclusions. She raised a man who finishes what he starts and who does not act on feeling alone. She also raised a man who knows that ignoring the truth does not make it less true. It just gives it more room to grow. I opened my laptop. We were on a family cell phone plan together, had been for 3 years. I managed the account because Samantha had asked me to after a billing dispute she hadn't had time to resolve. I had not looked at location history in the entire time we'd been on it together. It never occurred to me. You do not surveil the people you trust. But that night, with Mrs. Carter's easy, unbothered voice still sitting in my ear, I opened the account portal and looked. Samantha's phone had been in Decatur on some weekends. Not all of them. On 3 of the last 6 Saturdays, her phone location showed a zip code I did not recognize. Not her mother's neighborhood. Not anywhere near it. A residential area on the east side of Decatur, a specific street, consistent, always the same location, always from mid-morning until late in the evening. I wrote the address down on the back of an envelope. I stared at it. I am going to be honest about what I felt in that moment because I think it matters. It was not rage. People expect rage at that kind of moment. The gasp, the fist on the table, the surge of heat. What I actually felt was something much quieter and much colder. It was the specific feeling of a thing clicking into place. Like when you are chasing a fault in a circuit and you finally isolate the break. There is almost a relief in the clarity of it, even when what you have found is the last thing you wanted to find. That address on that envelope was a break in the circuit, and now I knew exactly where it was. I am not a man who makes decisions at midnight when his hands are unsteady. My father taught me that. He was a quiet man who had 2 speeds, considered and more considered, and I had inherited that from him the way you inherit a jawline or a way of standing. So I closed the laptop. I put the envelope in the inside pocket of my jacket. I went to bed. I did not sleep, but I lay still, which is its own discipline. Sometime around 2 in the morning, I heard Samantha's car in the driveway. She came in quietly. She always did when she thought I was asleep, moving through the house with a careful lightness that I had always taken as consideration. I lay in the dark and listened to her in the kitchen, heard the water run, heard her set something on the counter, heard her come down the hall. She slid into bed with the ease of someone whose conscience had not recently been disturbed. She adjusted the pillow. Her breathing slowed. She was asleep in 12 minutes. I counted. Sunday morning, she made breakfast. Eggs, turkey sausage, biscuits from the can she kept in the back of the refrigerator for slow mornings. She moved around the kitchen comfortable and unbothered, and I watched her from the table over my coffee and thought about all the Sundays that had looked exactly like this one. How many of them had looked like this and been something else beneath the surface? How many Sunday mornings I had sat at this table feeling like a man in a good life, while pieces of that life were being quietly redirected. She set a plate in front of me. She kissed the top of my head the way she sometimes did, a small, easy gesture, the kind of thing people do when they are not thinking about it, when it is just habit and fondness. I thanked her for the food. I ate. I said the biscuits were good, because they were. She sat across from me and scrolled her phone between bites and hummed something low and tuneless, and I looked at her and thought, she looks well, rested, at ease. None of it had anything to do with me. Over the next 2 weeks, I did not change anything visible. I woke up at the same time. I went to work. I came home. I made dinner on the nights when she was too tired after her hospital shifts. I laughed at her stories about her coworkers. I held her hand on the couch during the shows we watched together on Thursday evenings. But I was also listening differently now. Not for what she said, for the space between what she said and what she didn't. She mentioned her mother's doctor twice more. Both times she caught herself and used a vague pronoun. The doctor, where she had always before said Dr. Ware. I noticed. I said nothing. She took her phone to the bathroom. Every night. I noticed. I said nothing. She started a second email account on her laptop. I know because she left the tab open one morning when she stepped away to answer the door. A name I did not recognize. An account that was not the one we shared for household bills and family travel. I saw it for 4 seconds. I closed her laptop gently. I did not touch it. I was not ready to know everything yet. I needed to know the right things first, and in the right order. In electrical work, you do not start pulling wire before you understand the full system. You map first. You trace every connection. You know what is feeding what before you touch anything. I was mapping. There were smaller things I noticed once I was paying attention with that level of care. She had started working out in the mornings, something she had not done consistently in 2 years. She was always too tired after her overnight shifts. But 3 weeks into my quiet watching, she was waking up 40 minutes before she needed to, pulling on her running shoes, and coming back in flushed and energized. I said nothing about it. I noticed. She had a new playlist on her phone. I saw the screen unlocked on the kitchen counter one morning for a brief second before she snatched it up. Nothing suspicious in the list itself, just music, but it was music I didn't recognize. Not the gospel-heavy mix she played on Sunday mornings. Not the old-school R&B she put on when she cooked dinner. Something newer, more deliberate. The playlist of someone who has been discovering things about what they like and who they are with when no one who knows them is watching. I paid attention to all of it. I cataloged it without comment, the way I had learned in 20 years of electrical work to trust the pattern even when each individual signal looked ordinary. Alex called me on a Thursday. My oldest friend, the man who had been at my side at the altar, who I had known since we were both running the same Atlanta streets in middle school. He called to talk about a basketball game, but Alex has always been able to hear something I am not saying. About 6 minutes into the conversation, he went quiet and then said, "You good, man?" And I mean actually good. I told him I needed his ears more than his opinions for about 5 minutes. He said, "I got you. Go." I told him what I knew. Not the feelings, the facts. The voice through the door. The doctor who changed pronouns. The location on 3 different Saturdays. The address on the envelope in my jacket. Alex was quiet for longer than he had ever been quiet in the 30 years I had known him. I knew what the silence cost him, because Alex loves me the way men who grew up together in the same streets love each other, without conditions and without performance. He was sitting on the other end of that phone absorbing something that would hurt him on my behalf, and he was doing it without making it about himself. Then he said, "What do you need from me?" "Not yet," I said. "I'll tell you when." He said, "I'll be here." That was all I needed right then. Not advice. Not outrage on my behalf. Just a man I trusted completely, on the other end of a phone, telling me he was not going anywhere. I had that. That mattered. The first Saturday of April was clear and cool, the kind of spring morning that makes you feel like something is supposed to begin. Samantha was up early. She moved through the house with her usual Saturday morning efficiency, her bag already packed from the night before, her scrubs exchanged for jeans, and a soft pink sweater I had always liked on her. She came into the kitchen while I was making coffee, and she kissed my cheek and said her mother had called twice already, and she didn't want to get on the road too late. I handed her a travel mug. I told her to drive safe. She smiled at me. That smile I had known for 6 years, the one that reached all the way up. She said she loved me. I told her the same. She walked out the door, and I listened to her car back out of the driveway. I waited 25 minutes. Then I got in my truck. I want you to understand something about those 7 hours I drove. I was not frantic. I was not playing dramatic music in my head or rehearsing a confrontation or practicing what I would say. I drove the way I work, methodically, 1 mile at a time, the address from my envelope loaded into the navigation on my phone. I stopped once for gas outside of Macon. I drank the thermos of coffee I had made before I left. I thought about my mother. I thought about what she would say if she could see me driving towards something I already half knew, and I thought she would say, "You need to know the whole truth, baby. You cannot build anything on a foundation you haven't inspected." That's exactly what I was doing. Inspection. I pulled onto the street in Decatur at 2:47 in the afternoon. It was a quiet residential block. Nice houses, mature trees, the kind of neighborhood that had been there a while and had no intention of changing. I found the address and parked across the street and 2 houses down, close enough to see clearly, far enough that I was just another parked truck on a Saturday. Her car was in the driveway. That white Honda Accord I had helped her pick out 3 years ago, The one where we had argued pleasantly about the color because she wanted pearl white and I thought silver was more practical, and she had given me that look. The one that won every argument, and we left the lot in pearl white. I had washed that car for her twice in the last year. It was parked in another man's driveway. I sat. I did what I am good at. I waited. 40 minutes later, the front door opened. She came out first. She had her bag over her shoulder, and she was turning back toward the door, saying something with a smile that I felt like a fist in the center of my chest. A man appeared in the doorway. Tall, light-skinned, somewhere around my age. Relaxed. He leaned against the frame like a man who was comfortable in his own home, and the way he looked at my wife standing on his front step was not a look you manufacture. He had been looking at her that way for a while. You could tell. She laughed. Full and real. Then she reached out briefly and touched his arm, and he caught her hand for just a second, and then she pulled away and walked toward her car. I picked up my phone. I took photos. Not out of anger. Out of discipline. Because I had learned 2 weeks ago that feelings don't hold up in the light the way facts do. I took 11 photos. Clear. Time-stamped. She got in her car. He stood in the doorway until she backed out, then lifted one hand as she pulled away. He went inside. The door closed. I sat in my truck. Here is what I did not do. I did not get out and knock on that door. I did not call her phone and listen to her manage me from 200 feet away. I did not cry in that truck, though I want to be truthful. There was a moment, about 3 minutes after she drove away, when something moved through me that did not have a clean name. It was not anger. It was not sadness. It was something older and quieter than either of those. The feeling of a man who has loved something completely and watched it love somewhere else. I let it move through. I did not hold on to it. Then I started the truck and drove to a gas station 6 blocks away. I parked. I texted Alex one line. I need you to find out who lives at this address. I sent him the numbers from the envelope. His reply took 11 minutes. He has a friend who works in property management, a woman named Sherry's, who could look up a lease or a deed with one phone call. When Alex asked nicely and brought her nephew's youth league snacks, which Alex had apparently been doing for exactly these kinds of emergencies for years without telling me. The reply came back in a single paragraph. The house belonged to a man named Darnell Wilder, 38 years old. No mortgage listed. He owned it outright. Alex added one more line at the end, with a care that told me he had sat with it before sending. Man, I'm sorry. Call me when you're ready. I read it twice. I set my phone in the cup holder. Then I pulled out of that gas station and I drove the 7 hours home. I was home by 10:30 that night. The house was dark. Samantha had beaten me back. Her car was in the garage. The kitchen light was off, and I could hear the sound of the television in the bedroom. I came in through the side door. I set my keys down. I washed my hands at the kitchen sink. Same as always. She called from the bedroom. That you, baby? Yeah, I said. Long day. You eat. I grabbed something on the road. Don't get up. I heard her settle back. The television volume lowered. I stood at the kitchen sink with my hands braced on the counter and my head down for about 90 seconds. The cold water was still running over my hands, and I did not turn it off. I just stood there and let it run and thought about a Saturday afternoon 3 years ago when Samantha and I had driven out to Lake Lanier on a whim. No plan, no reservation, just a blanket and a cooler and the particular freedom of 2 people who had no place they needed to be. We sat by the water until it got dark, and on the way home she had fallen asleep in the passenger seat with her cheek pressed against the window and her hand resting open on the center console between us. I had driven the whole way home in silence, just to not disturb that. I had loved her with that kind of attention, the kind that notices someone's sleeping hand and decides the radio is not worth disturbing it. I turned off the water. I dried my hands. I turned off the kitchen light and went to sit in the backyard. The pecan tree was still bare from winter, those thick branches reaching up into the night sky like something that had decided, a long time ago, to stop reaching and just hold. I sat in the chair I kept under it year-round, the old wooden one with the armrests worn smooth from years of me sitting exactly there on warm evenings, and I let the night be quiet around me. I thought about the first summer we spent in this house. Samantha had come outside one evening with 2 glasses of sweet tea and found me under this tree after a hard day, and she sat in the grass beside my chair, not in the other chair, in the grass, right there on the ground beside me, and leaned her head against my knee and said, "Tell me about it." I had told her everything, every frustration and every doubt about the business, every worry I carried as a man trying to build something real. How the school district contract felt impossibly large for a crew of 3 people. How I was terrified of letting down the people who had taken a chance on me. How some mornings I sat in the truck before a job and had to talk myself through the first 5 minutes. She had listened without interrupting, which is rarer than it sounds. She did not offer solutions. She did not redirect. She just listened, and at the end she lifted her head from my knee and looked up at me and said, "You're going to do it, Richard. I know you. You finish everything you start." I had believed her. That woman, sitting in the grass by this tree on a summer evening, and the woman who had laughed on another man's front step in Decatur this afternoon. I was trying to understand how they were the same person. Not in anger, in honest confusion. Because I had been paying attention to Samantha for 6 years with the same care I brought to everything I built, and what I thought I was paying attention to, and what was actually there were beginning to pull apart at the seams. And the gap between the two was not small. It was almost 2 years wide. I sat under that tree until midnight. The April air was cool, and the yard smelled like soil and new grass, and somewhere down the block a dog was making its case about something. I did not move. I let the quiet do what quiet does when you stop fighting it. It tells you the truth about what you already know. I made 2 decisions out there in the dark, the kind that settle quietly into the base of your spine once they are made. Not the hot, reactive kind of decisions that come apart under pressure. The other kind. The kind built on ground that has already been tested. First, I would not move until I had the complete picture. Every detail, every thread, every number. My mother did not raise a man who half finishes anything. If this marriage was going to come apart, I needed to understand exactly how it was built, from the inside, all the way through, before I touched a single piece of it. Incomplete information was how good men made bad moves. I was not going to make a bad move. Second, I was going to call my Uncle Raymond. Raymond Dillard was my father's older brother, retired from the Atlanta Police Department after 26 years, and the most methodical man I had ever known outside of my own father. He was 71 years old and spent his retirement doing 2 things: growing tomatoes in a garden behind his house in Cascade Heights that he tended with the discipline of a man who had spent decades working cases and knowing things other people didn't. He had a mind that worked like a filing cabinet, organized by category and date, and a way of asking questions that made people answer more than they had planned to. He had also, in his years on the force, worked more domestic fraud cases than he ever talked about at family dinners. He understood the kind of paperwork that told the truth about a life when the people living it had stopped being honest. I called him Sunday morning before Samantha woke up. I had moved to the back porch with my coffee so the conversation would stay private. The sun was just coming up over the neighbor's fence, washing the yard in that low, pale gold that early April does in Atlanta before the humidity comes back and takes over. He picked up on the first ring. "Richard, Uncle Ray," I said, "I need your help with something, and I need it done quiet." A pause. One of Raymond's pauses is not empty. It is him organizing, categorizing what you have said and what it means and what comes next. "Come by Tuesday evening," he said. "Bring whatever papers you got." "Yes, sir," I said. That was the entire conversation. For sentences between us, and everything that needed to be said had been. That is the gift of the right people in your corner. You do not have to explain yourself from the ground up every time something requires explaining. Uncle Raymond's kitchen table on a Tuesday evening felt like the most serious room I had ever sat in that wasn't a courtroom. He poured 2 cups of coffee without asking if I wanted one, and set a yellow legal pad beside each cup. He sat across from me, folded his hands, and said, "Start at the beginning. Everything, in order." I did. I talked for 40 minutes without interruption. The voice through the door. The pronoun shift. The location data. The address. The drive to Decatur. What I saw. What Alex found. All of it, in the order it happened, factual and flat. Uncle Raymond wrote things down. Not everything, specific things. Dates, names, addresses, the timeline. When I finished, he turned the legal pad around so I could see it, and he walked me through what he had written. "You've got behavior, and you've got location," he said. "What you don't have yet is duration and money." Duration, meaning how long. How long it's been going on changes what you're looking at legally. And money changes it practically. He was right. I had been so focused on the emotional architecture of what was happening that I had not yet looked at whether it had a financial dimension. Uncle Raymond spent the next hour showing me how to look. We pulled 2 years of joint bank statements from the online account I managed. Uncle Raymond had a way of reading a bank statement that reminded me of how I read an electrical diagram, not line by line, but pattern by pattern, looking for where the current changed direction. He found it in 20 minutes. There were cash withdrawals. Not huge, not dramatic, but consistent. Every 2 to 3 weeks, $200 to $300, taken from ATMs that were not near our house, not near Grady Hospital, not near anywhere Samantha routinely was. Over 22 months, it totaled just over $5,400. Not a fortune, but not a rounding error. That's discretionary money, Uncle Raymond said, tapping the column with one finger. Cash doesn't leave a receipt trail. She's been managing a parallel expense line. He set down his pen. He looked at me across the table, steady and without drama. I'm going to ask you one question, and I need you to take time with the answer. Go ahead. What do you want the outcome to be? I sat with that. He let me. Uncle Raymond had always been a man who understood that the right answer to a real question does not come in seconds. I want the truth, I said finally. All of it. And then I want what is mine. He nodded once, like he had been expecting exactly that, and was satisfied. Then we go in order, he said. And we don't move until we know everything. 3 days after sitting at Uncle Raymond's table, I did something I had never done in 6 years of marriage. I went to visit Mrs. Evelyn Carter on my own. I called ahead. I told her I was going to be in the Decatur area and wanted to stop by. She told me she would put on a fresh pot and have a slice of her pound cake ready. That woman's pound cake has always been exceptional. I want that noted. I sat in her living room on a Thursday afternoon with a plate of cake and a cup of coffee, and Mrs. Carter settled into her armchair with the ease of a woman who has earned every year of her rest. We talked about everything at first: the business, the church's spring fundraiser, the pecan tree in our yard that she insisted was worth more than we were giving it credit for. Then the conversation found its way, the way conversations do when two people are both holding something. Samantha doing all right? I asked. Easy. Unhurried. Mrs. Carter looked at me. She is a woman in her mid-60s who has seen a great deal and processed most of it quietly. She has the kind of eyes that hold more than they let go of. She comes to see me, she said carefully. But not every weekend. Richard. Her voice had something in it. Not guilt, but weight. The weight of a woman who had been holding something she wasn't sure was hers to put down. I know, I said quietly. How long have you known? She set her cake plate on the side table. She pressed her hands together in her lap. She looked at the window for a moment, then back at me. I don't know the whole of it, she said. I never asked. That's between a husband and a wife. But she mentioned his name once by accident, about 4 months ago. She corrected herself fast, but I heard it. Darnell, I said. She closed her eyes. Just briefly. Then she opened them and said, Richard, you are a good man. I have known that since the first evening she brought you to this house. Whatever she has done, it doesn't speak to your worth. Don't let it. I thanked her. I'm in it completely. What I did not do was fall apart in Mrs. Carter's living room. I ate the rest of my pound cake. I told her the hydrangeas on her front porch looked like they needed a little more water. I stayed for 45 minutes. I drove home. The following Monday morning, before Samantha woke up, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and the card I had been carrying in my wallet for 2 weeks. The card of a family law attorney named Sandra Whitfield, whose office was in Buckhead and whose name had come to me through a client of mine, a man who had been through something like this 2 years earlier and had spoken about her in the specific way you speak about someone who did not waste your time or your money. I called at 8:02 in the morning. Her assistant booked me for Wednesday at 4 p.m. I drove there in my work truck and sat in her office on the 14th floor with a file folder on my lap and told her everything in the order Uncle Raymond had taught me to tell it. Sandra Whitfield was a sharp, careful woman in her 50s who listened without filling my pauses with sympathy. I appreciated that more than I could have told her. She opened the folder I gave her. She read the bank statements Uncle Raymond had annotated. She looked at the location timestamps. She looked at the photographs. She asked me 3 questions. What were our marital assets? The house, jointly owned. A savings account I had built before the marriage that remained in my name only. The business, established before marriage but grown during it, which made the question of its classification during divorce complex. A joint investment account opened 3 years ago. What was I entitled to? In Georgia, equitable distribution applied to marital property. The house was subject to division. The joint investment account was subject to division. The business, because of its growth during the marriage, would require evaluation. What did the $5,400 in cash withdrawals mean for my position? It didn't alter the fundamental asset division, but it established a pattern of intentional financial separation, a pattern my attorney could use to argue against any claim Samantha might make to a greater share of disputed assets. I left that office with a map. Not a plan, not yet. A map. I knew where everything was. I knew what each thing was worth. I knew what the next step looked like. That was the first time in 6 weeks I got into my truck after leaving a building and felt something other than the weight of it. Not relief, not happiness. Just the particular steadiness that comes when a man knows exactly what he is standing on, even if what he is standing on is broken. I drove home. I made dinner. I sat across from my wife at the table where we had eaten 1,000 meals. She talked about her week, her patience, a funny thing one of the children in her unit had said that afternoon. She was warm and present and easy. I listened to all of it, and I watched her, and I thought, she does not know yet that I know. And I am not going to tell her tonight. Not tonight. Not until everything I needed was in order. I am going to tell you about the Sunday I set the table for 4. I had spent 2 weeks getting ready for it. Not emotionally. Emotionally, I had been ready since Decatur. I mean practically. I had confirmed with my attorney. I had confirmed with Uncle Raymond. I had called my mother, Dorothy Dillard. I called her on a Friday evening while Samantha was at the hospital. My mother lives 20 minutes from us, in the same neighborhood she's been in for 30 years. She picked up before the second ring, the way she always does with me and my brothers. We are the only 3 people in the world for whom she answers that fast. Richard, she said. Just my name. The way she says it when she already knows something is wrong. Mama, I said, I need to tell you something. And then I need to ask you to be at my table Sunday. She did not ask me any questions on that call. She told me she would be there and that she would bring a sweet potato pie because she was not coming to her son's house empty-handed regardless of what the occasion was. That is Dorothy Dillard. I called Alex next. I told him Sunday dinner. He said, I'll be there. Do I need to wear my good shirt? I told him yes. He said, okay, that tells me everything. Samantha came home Friday night from her shift tired and warm, and she fell asleep with her head on my shoulder on the couch during a movie we both stopped paying attention to. And I sat there for a while in the quiet of our living room with her weight against my side, and the movie going unwatched, and I let myself feel the full grief of it. I had loved this woman. I still did, some quieter part of me that had not yet received the full message. That part would catch up. But sitting there in the dark on our couch in the house I had filled with the right light, I let myself grieve what this had been before I accepted what it was. Sunday came gray and still, the sky low and heavy with the kind of clouds that could not decide. I cooked. I am not the cook in our marriage. Samantha is the one who can build a meal from whatever is in the refrigerator and make it taste intentional. But I can do a proper Sunday dinner. My mother's baked chicken, rice, green beans, and the cornbread she taught me when I was 12. I cooked all of it that morning while Samantha slept late, and the house filled up with the smell of something Sunday and familiar in ours. She came downstairs at 10, still in her robe, and stopped in the kitchen doorway when she saw the spread. Who's coming? She asked. Just a few people, I said. Sit down and have some coffee. She looked at me for a moment. I kept my face easy and warm. She sat. My mother arrived at 1 o'clock with the sweet potato pie and a look in her eyes that she kept completely to herself. She kissed Samantha's cheek. She hugged me for 3 seconds longer than usual. She went to the kitchen and asked if there was anything left to do, and I told her to sit because everything was handled. Alex arrived at 1:15 in his good shirt. He hugged Samantha. He dapped me up and looked me in the eye and said nothing that needed to be said out loud. Uncle Raymond came at 1:30. He had not met Samantha more than twice at family gatherings. He shook her hand warmly and accepted a glass of iced tea and sat at the table with the particular stillness of a man who has spent 30 years watching rooms. We all sat down to eat. The food was good. The conversation was careful. The way conversation is when several people in a room know something one person does not. Samantha was warm and social. She has always been good in rooms, easy with people, the kind of woman who draws conversation naturally. I watched her being that woman and thought about all the things I had loved about her that were completely true. Her warmth was real. Her laugh was real. That was the thing that made none of the rest of it simple. After the plates were cleared and my mother had served the pie, I excused myself to the kitchen for a moment. I came back with a folder. I set it on the table beside my plate, flat and simple as setting down a napkin. Samantha's eyes went to it. Not quickly, but they went to it. Alex picked up his coffee cup. Uncle Raymond sat completely still. My mother put both hands in her lap. Samantha looked at me. Something had shifted in her expression. Not fear. Not guilt. Something more complicated than either. Recognition, maybe. The look of someone who has been waiting, somewhere underneath everything, for a door to open. Richard. Her voice came out careful. What is this? It's a conversation, I said. One that's been waiting long enough. She looked at the folder. She looked at me. Then she said something I had not expected. She said, I know. The room went absolutely still. I know you know, she said again, quieter. I've known for a few weeks. I saw it in you. I just didn't know how to start it myself. I looked at her. My mother made no sound. I opened the folder. I put the bank statements on the table first. 22 months of consistent withdrawals, totaled and annotated in Uncle Raymond's clean handwriting. I set them down one page at a time. She looked at the pages. She did not touch them. Then the photographs. I placed 3 of them on the table, face up. Her car in a driveway that was not her mother's. Her hand on his arm on a front step indicator. I heard my mother draw a slow breath and release it. Samantha's jaw tightened. She looked away from the photos. She looked at the table. Then she looked back at me, and what I saw in her face right then was not what I expected either. It was not defiance. It was not the pivot I had been preparing for. It was something that looked like exhaustion. Like a person who has been carrying something heavy for a long time and has finally, in this room in front of these people who love her husband, run out of road. How long? I asked. Just those 2 words. She closed her eyes. Almost 2 years, she said. The number landed in the room like something solid. Almost 2 years. 1 year, 11 months of Saturdays. Of a sick mother who was fine. Of a marriage I had been paying attention to every single day, and she had been living in 2 halves. Alex set his coffee cup down. I'm not going to sit here and try to explain it, Samantha said. Her voice was steady but thin, like something stretched past its natural limit. There's no explanation I can give you in this room that's going to be enough. I know that. No, I said. There isn't. She looked at the photographs again. Then she looked at my mother, and whatever she saw in Dorothy Dillard's face, not rage, not coldness, just the still, clear look of a woman who had raised her son to deserve better, made something collapse behind Samantha's eyes. She said, I'm sorry, Dorothy. My mother said nothing. She folded her hands on the table and looked at her, and the silence said everything a sentence could not. I slid the last document across the table. The divorce filing. Already drafted. My attorney's information on the letterhead. I said my terms once. Clearly, I did not repeat them. The house. My name on the deed. My equity intact. The joint investment account, split according to what I had contributed from premarital savings. The business mine. The cash withdrawals to be acknowledged in the settlement documentation. Samantha stared at the papers. Then she said the only thing left in her that wanted to fight. You built this business during our marriage. I supported. You withdrew $5,400 in cash from our joint account over 22 months to support a second life. I said it without heat. Flat. The way you state a measurement. We can discuss what support looks like in a settlement meeting. But this house, Samantha, this house that I wired myself, that I put 6 years into, is not the place we're negotiating. She went quiet. Alex stood up. He picked up his plate and walked it to the kitchen without a word. Uncle Raymond followed him. My mother sat still. Samantha looked at me across the table we had picked out together, in the house I had filled with the right light, and I looked back at her, and neither of us had anything left that didn't require a lawyer and a signature. I'll get a hotel tonight, she said finally. I know, I said. She stood. She went upstairs. I heard her moving around in the bedroom. Drawers, the closet, the zip of a bag. 20 minutes later, she came downstairs with a roller bag and her work satchel. She paused in the kitchen doorway. Richard. Her voice cracked. Just once. I did love you. I need you to know that. I looked at her. I thought about the church fundraiser. About Stone Mountain. About her head on my shoulder on Friday night. I know you did, I said. That's the part that's hardest. She walked out the front door. I sat at the table. My mother came back from the kitchen and sat down beside me. She did not say anything. She covered my hand with hers. The hand that had ironed uniforms every night for 11 years. The hand that had spooned food into 3 boys and held our father's hand through every hard year and come out steady on the other side. I let her hold it. The settlement took for months. It was not a fight. That surprised some people who knew the circumstances. But what I had learned from Uncle Raymond and from Sandra Whitfield and from every electrical job I had ever done was this. When the documentation is complete and the position is solid, the resolution is usually quiet. Samantha had no ground to contest from. She knew it. Her attorney knew it. The cash withdrawal pattern had been documented, dated, and totaled. The photographs were clear. The location history supported the timeline across months. There was no alternate version of the story that could stand up against what was already on paper, and a good attorney, which Samantha's was, does not spend their client's money fighting a losing position. The house was mine, clear. The investment account was split. The portion I had contributed from premarital savings returned to me and properly documented. The business was mine, valued, and settled with no ongoing claim. The cash withdrawals were acknowledged in the settlement documentation, not as a criminal matter, because they were not, but as a formal record that they had existed and been accounted for. Every dollar I had poured into this marriage, every year of it, I knew where it landed. We did not see each other after the Sunday dinner until the required mediation session, which lasted 2 hours and 40 minutes and was conducted with a level of professional civility that I believe genuinely surprised the mediator. She was a calm woman who had seen enough family law to expect volume and tears and recrimination. What she got instead was 2 people who had already said the hardest things in a dining room and arrived here with nothing left to perform. Neither of us made speeches. Neither of us redirected toward blame. We worked through the documents in order, confirmed what had been agreed, and signed what needed to be signed. We left in separate cars. I sat in my truck in the parking deck for a while, not collapsing, not crying, just sitting in the specific quiet that follows something enormous being officially finished. The kind of quiet that is not empty. It is the sound of something that has stopped moving, finally, after a long time of movement that was never going anywhere good. Samantha moved in with a cousin in Marietta. I understood she requested a transfer within Grady Hospital not long after, which I took not as flight, but as sense. You do not easily rebuild in a place where everyone knows the shape of the life that fell apart. I understood that better than I would have admitted a year earlier. Her mother called me once, about 6 weeks into the settlement process. Mrs. Carter, calling from the same armchair where she had told me, "You are a good man over pound cake." She did not say much. She said she was sorry for what her name had been used to cover. Not willingly, not knowingly, but the alibi had carried her name nonetheless. And she was a woman who felt the weight of that even though she had not built it. She said it with the quiet directness of someone who believes in accountability even when the accounting costs her something personal. I told her she did not owe me a thing. I thanked her for the truth she had given me in her living room. I meant both of those statements completely. Darnell Wilder did not enter the formal picture at all. That was a deliberate choice I made early and never revisited. He had not made a vow to me. He had not sat across from me at a kitchen table and eaten food I cooked. He had not looked me in the eye at any point in his involvement in my life. He was not who I had built anything with. My business was with my wife, and I had conducted it entirely there. Some people, when I eventually told them the fuller story, seemed to expect that I had confronted him, that there had been a scene, a driveway confrontation, some moment of direct reckoning between 2 men. There was not, and I want to explain why, because I think it matters. A man who goes to confront someone who owes him nothing is looking for a feeling, not a resolution. I was not interested in feelings. I was interested in facts, documentation, and what was mine. I got all 3. The scene would have cost me dignity and given me nothing. 2 months after the settlement was finalized, Alex came to visit on a Saturday afternoon with a cooler of cold drinks and a comprehensive set of opinions about my landscaping that he had apparently been developing for years and was finally prepared to deliver in full detail. We sat in the backyard under the pecan tree while he covered the lawn, the hedges, the state of my tool shed, and at least 3 other things I cannot remember now because they did not register as important in the way Alex intended. Then the landscaping commentary wound down, the way it always does when Alex is using one topic to circle in on another, and he went quiet and looked at me for a long moment. "You look different," he said. "Different how?" I said. He was quiet for a beat. Alex does not waste his honest observations. Like yourself, he said. Like before you were carrying something you didn't have a name for. I thought about that. I didn't know I was carrying it that long, I said. I know you didn't, he said. But I could see it on you. About 8, 9 months before the end. You started getting careful in a way you never used to be. Like you were managing something. I didn't say anything because it wasn't mine to name yet. That was the part that sat with me. That Alex had seen it in me before I had fully acknowledged it in myself. That the weight of living alongside a secret that was not yours to keep still shows up in your body, in your face, in the way you move through rooms. I had been carrying her deception without knowing it because I had been close enough to it that it had its own gravity. I had not been the same since the drive to Decatur. But I also had not been the same as I was before the voice through the door, before the location data, before all the small things I had filed away and told myself were nothing. That version of me who smoothed things over and gave every doubt away for free. That man had served his purpose and was done serving it. What replaced him was simpler, more comfortable in its own skin. A man who knew the value of what he had built and would not be careless about it again. I started working with my hands more on the weekends. I had shifted during the marriage toward management and administration, estimates, client calls, payroll, scheduling. The actual physical work had reduced to a fraction of what it once was. I had missed it, the way you miss something physical that your body was built for, without always being able to name the specific absence. That fall I started doing it again. I rewired the kitchen light fixtures one Sunday morning. Not because anything was wrong, I had installed them correctly the first time, but because I wanted to. Because I wanted the light in my kitchen to be something I had chosen with both hands, on a Sunday morning, with nobody's preferences to account for but my own. I also called Sandra Whitfield's office and asked that the final invoice be sent to my business address rather than the house. A small thing, but I had been blending the personal and professional in ways that had cost me clarity, and I wanted both clean and separate from here forward. I sat in the backyard a great deal that fall, under the pecan tree, in the chair with the worn armrests, watching the yard go amber and rust the way Atlanta yards do when October finally commits. The tree started dropping again, more than I could use, the way it always had. I bagged most of it. I brought 2 bags to my mother. I left a bag on Mrs. Carter's front step one Thursday evening without knocking, because she had always kept pecans in her baking and because she had given me something honest in her living room that I had not forgotten and did not intend to. She sent me a text the next morning. Found these on my porch. Thank you, baby. You are a good man. Then, a moment later, the Lord sees the heart, Richard. He always has. I sat with that for a long time, not performing anything from it, just sitting with it quietly, the way you sit with something true that lands in the right place and stays. 11 months after the settlement was finalized, I hired a 7th employee. Her name is Jasmine Carter. No relation to Mrs. Evelyn, just a common name in a city full of good people. She is 26 years old, a licensed electrician who came to my business through a workforce development program I had partnered with a year earlier. She is precise, fast, and the kind of worker who asks the right questions instead of pretending she knows something she doesn't. I recognized that quality immediately. My mother would say I recognized it because I have it myself. The business now carries 9 employees, 3 active commercial contracts, and a residential division that my second in command, a man named Curtis who has been with me since the 2nd year, runs with the kind of steady confidence that lets me sleep at night. I also, in October of that year, finally replaced the kitchen faucet I had been meaning to replace for 3 years. It is not a romantic detail, but I want you to understand what it represents. For 3 years I had looked at that faucet and thought, soon. Soon was always delayed by something else, someone else's timeline, someone else's preference about when and how. That October morning, I drove to the hardware store, picked out exactly what I wanted without consultation, installed it in 40 minutes, and stood back and looked at it the way I look at completed work. It is a very good faucet. Brushed nickel, gooseneck style. It is exactly right for that kitchen. I went to a cookout in July of that year at Alex's house. He had been hosting a summer cookout for years. The same group of people, rotating faces, his mother's macaroni and cheese that she refused to make for any occasion other than this one gathering per year because she said it kept it special. I had not been to the last 2. I had had reasons, or things I called reasons. I went this time. I wore a good shirt of my own choosing. I ate Alex's mother's macaroni and cheese. I talked to people I hadn't talked to in too long, and I did not monitor my own face for the entirety of the evening. That was the clearest difference. I have always been a man who is present in a room. But somewhere in the last 2 years of the marriage, I had started managing my presence, watching what I showed, measuring what I said, carrying something quietly that affected everything. I was not doing that at Alex's cookout. I was just there. There was a woman at the cookout named Renee, 34 years old, a physical therapist who worked with a practice in Midtown. Alex introduced her to me because Alex is Alex, and he had made a decision that I was not going to know about until it was already happening. She had a direct, easy way about her, not performing at ease, actually at ease, which is rarer and more valuable. We talked for an hour about nothing in particular, the city, the heat, her work, my business. She asked me a question about electrical work that was genuinely curious, not conversational, and I found myself explaining the logic of a circuit with more enthusiasm than I had brought to a non-work conversation in a very long time. I did not ask for her number that evening, but Alex gave it to me anyway, on a post-it note he handed me at the door when I was leaving, with a look that dared me to say something about it. I said, "I'll think about it." He said, "Think fast." I texted her 4 days later. I kept it simple. I said it was good to meet her, and that I would like to continue the conversation if she was open to it. She replied in 12 minutes. She said she was. I am telling you that part not because it is the point of this story. It is not. This is not a story about what came after. Not yet. This is a story about a man who built something real, watched it be dismantled from the inside, and chose to respond with precision instead of noise. It is a story about what you carry when you love someone completely and what you put down when that love is used against you. What I will say about Renee is only this. She is a woman who asks the right questions and listens to the full answer. I had forgotten, somewhere in those last quiet months of a broken marriage, what it felt like to be listened to that way. Not managed, not performed at, actually heard. I am learning to receive that. The living room in my house, the one Samantha and I had chosen together, neutral and agreeable and committed to nothing. I repainted it in November. A deep navy blue, the kind of color that holds the room, that makes the morning light do something specific and good against it. My mother stood in the doorway when she came to see it and said, "Now that looks like you." I stood beside her and looked at that wall. "Yeah," I said, "it does." I thought about the version of me who drove 7 hours to a street in Decatur with a thermos of coffee and a feeling he had been trying to outrun. I thought about the version of me who sat under the pecan tree in the dark and made 2 quiet decisions. I thought about the man who cooked a Sunday dinner and set a folder on a table and said his terms once without repeating them. I thought about what my mother told me when I was 14 years old, that the only thing a man truly owns is his word and his work ethic. Everything I had done in that year, every document gathered, every question asked, every decision made in order, had been an extension of that. Not revenge, not performance. Work. The same discipline I brought to every job I had ever done, from a single truck with a borrowed generator on a fourplex in Southwest Atlanta. I had inspected the foundation. I had found the fault. I had corrected it and rebuilt the line clean. The light in my house has always been right. I made sure of that from the beginning. And now, standing in a navy blue living room on a November morning with no one's preferences to manage but my own, I turned on every light I had installed with my own 2 hands, and I let the house be exactly what it was. Mine. That is enough. That has always been enough. If this story moved you, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. Tomorrow's story is one you will not want to miss. Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from today.